Everyone working on one of our drilling operations knows that safety is our #1 priority and a key company value. That's why we focus on identifying hazards and controlling our work to promote safe working conditions.
We are all part of an important team and must work in a responsible manner. This means observing all company procedures and safe work practices, wearing protective clothing required for the job, and knowing how to do the job the right way. It also requires that we respond to emergencies in an appropriate manner.
I truly believe Control of Work equips each of you with the ability to reduce or eliminate personal risk from identified hazards.
Whatever your job in Alaska's oil industry, the most important tool for the task is not the tool in your hands, it is your hands. Hands are involved in almost everything we do, and that puts them right up front for exposure to more risks and potential hazards than any other part of the body. It is also the reason hand injuries account for the highest percentage of recordable and lost time incidents. That's why Doyon Drilling, Nordic Chelista, and Schlumberger have such a strong commitment to operational safety and emphasizing the steps each of us needs to follow to reduce hand injuries. During the next few minutes, we're going to review the common causes of hand injuries, identify some key hazards, discuss ways to deal with risks, and demonstrate how to control our work safely. The key to preventing painful hand injuries is simple and personal. You've heard it many times before. Each of us is responsible and accountable for our own safety. And when we lose focus on this fact, incidents happen. Several factors contribute to this lack of focus, such as not understanding the job, not using the right tools or wearing the appropriate PPE, failing to conduct a task hazard assessment before work starts, and not paying attention to the task at hand. It all boils down to not following approved safety procedures, believing an unsafe practice is acceptable because no one has ever corrected it, and trying to save time by taking shortcuts. It's a matter of attitude and behavior, because the majority of these incidents are preventable. More often than not, we approach work we're doing alone and maybe with one other person by jumping right in without giving much thought to the risks and hazards involved. This is especially true if the job is routine, something we've done dozens of times. Incident reports tell us that improper hand positioning is the #1 cause of these injuries. How do we avoid these painful problems? It's not a complex process, but it does require specific planning to identify risks and hazards before you begin a project or pick up a tool. That means following established control of work standards. These include planning the work, assessing and managing risks, following all plans and procedures during the work, learning from past jobs, and stopping any unsafe work. Planning the work starts with a standard operating procedure. If one is not already in place, one will be written. By assessing the hazards and the required steps of a particular job, a task hazard recognition worksheet becomes the first step in developing approved work procedures. During the pre-job planning, review reports from similar past jobs. These often can provide important lessons learned that may apply to the job you will be working on. Another key to following control of work procedures is making certain you have a thorough understanding of the tasks you must complete and their interaction with other crew members. If not, discuss your concerns with your supervisor. The goal of a task hazard assessment is to make sure you select the right procedures, tools, and PPE associated with the job. Look for all types of risks, including those that can cause your hands to be struck by or against something. Identify pinch points and things you can get caught on, caught in, or caught between. Once you've identified and assessed the hazards of the job, spend a few minutes thinking about how you can eliminate or control those hazards. This might mean changing the procedures you use, choosing different tools, changing the position of your body and hands, using additional PPE, and making certain all equipment guards are in place. Before starting a job, inspect the tools you're going to be using. If anything doesn't look right, take the tool out of service. Also, after the job's been completed, inspect the tools again and clean them up. If it doesn't look right, take the tool out of service, notify the right people so you can get another tool to replace it. An important PPE requirement is matching hand protection to the task. That step doesn't involve any guessing because all work has been assessed and a glove matrix created showing glove requirements. Glove types are identified by the risks associated with the work. Just refer to the chart and it will indicate the glove type to use.
These are my favorite type of the impact gloves. They're fairly comfortable, they don't overheat. As far as wearing any of them, these are pretty user-friendly.
Once the job starts, follow the control of work procedures discussed in the pre-job meeting. Monitor all work permits, stay alert for any unexpected changes, and stop work if you think it's unsafe or if someone doesn't understand how to handle a task.
Everybody on our crew that we work with has the ability, the right, and the obligation to stop any job that they see if something doesn't look right.
Whether you're working on a rotary rig, workover rig, or a coiled tubing unit, risks begin as soon as you arrive on location.
During our rig up, hands to be at risk in several places.
One of those places is handling the lubricator.
And it'll be hooked to this trolley, so when we pick it up or lay it down, this is going to be moving. So obviously, hands need to be kept up high and out of the way of any of these two points here. It's several thousand pounds, and it's going to be going from vertical to out this way and laid down.
Handling tubulars creates many risks to your hands and fingers. No matter what type of tubular you're dealing with, pay close attention. If you're rolling pipe, stay on top and watch your footing, because if you slip and reach with your hands to regain balance, you may put them in harm's way. Remember, this equipment might be moving while you're working with it. That means conditions are changing, as are the potential hazards for hand injuries. So stay alert and be prepared to react to unexpected movement. Moving much of the equipment we use often involves using cranes, winches, and other lifting devices. That means you're going to be handling cables, chains, slings, hooks, and latches. All of these create safety challenges. Using them safely means checking your sling, attaching it properly, and knowing the various pinch points involved, like spring-loaded latches. Every time you attach or remove a pickup sling or a chain, watch your hand placement. Don't let your hand or glove get caught between the item you're attaching to and the sling or cable. One other point about cranes. Don't use overhead rails as a handhold. Yes, they are handy, but the potential danger isn't worth the risk. If someone else is using the crane and can't see you holding onto the track, a nasty injury is very possible.
To pick these tools up, if they're on this rack, if I get my hands behind here, then it's going to pinch them off as well. So always keeping your hands, don't get behind anything because you can't see what's behind here.
Moving heavy tubulars in the shop area also comes with hand risks, which can be mitigated by using handling tools.
This is a tool handling stick for moving our big tubulars so that you don't risk getting your hand between the moving tools and like a stationary metal object that would take your hand off. Like these racks right here, if I was pushing this around with my hand and bumped into this guy right here, it's, you know, the chance of taking a finger off is pretty high. So if I'd have been trying to control it with my hand and bumped into this guy here, I mean, the risk of smashing my hand is pretty high.
On the rig floor, always be aware of your body position, especially when pulling pipe or casing off the skate. If not, you could get caught between the pipe and the stump. To prevent this, stand off to the side as you pull the pipe into position. Stay out of the line of fire. Anytime you're making up or breaking out pipe, casing, tubing, or tools, don't place hands or fingers underneath the joints where they could be caught. Pipe threads can also be a problem. Watch your hand placement. When putting in slips, use the handles. That goes for attaching the dog collar as well. Watch that your hands don't get caught between the collar and the slips. Keep your feet back to prevent injury if the collar falls. When pulling the slips, place your hands underneath the top of the handles. This keeps them clear of the bottom of the elevator, and use proper hand placement when opening and closing elevator links. Hand positioning is critical when using the iron roughneck. You not only need to be aware of latches, but also moving parts. When using the controls, don't forget about the position of your free hand. Keep it in a safe area. Use the handles and keep your hands out of the die area at all times. Similar to the iron roughneck, little jerks are used for making up and breaking out pipe and bottom hole assemblies. Watch hand placement at all times. If you're assisting the operator bringing the little jerks over to the pipe, keep your hands in the green area or somewhere where the actuation of the body won't catch and pinch your fingers. Keep your hands off the red taped areas. Working with winches and tuggers on any rig presents several hazards for your hands. Keep them away from the drum areas so they don't get pulled into the spool. If the winch or tugger has a handguard, make sure it is in place and secure. Sliding the wire rope through your hands is also dangerous because of wickers. These broken or frayed strands of steel wire can cause serious and painful injuries. Wickers are not only a problem with wire rope, they are also a hazard when working with tubulars, chains, and recycled metal. When making up tools, similar hazards are present as well.
Okay, so one of the hazards we face here on Slickline is when we're wrenching, tightening our tools or loosening our tools. As you can see, this piece of stem is pretty chewed up. So we'll tighten her down, and the force of the jaws creates burrs, as you can see, on the tool, which can end up embedded in your hand. Sometimes they're able to pick them out, other times they have to cut them out. Try to avoid that. So we've started filing. After we wrench, we file all the way around our tools. Make sure that they stay safe so we don't end up with burrs.
Another common source of pinch points is the large collection of downhole tools and subs we keep on hand. The biggest problem is that they are generally stacked pretty close together.
Yeah, there's definitely pinch points. As you can see, these two right here are super close. You know, we try and keep our hands to the top of them and grab, lift everything from the top. Try not to get your hand down in where the threaded connection is. So we'll lift up, same way setting it back in. You know, keep your hands up out of harm's way and away from being pinched down in there with all the rest of the tools.
You will also want to keep an eye out for pinch points that are built into the various specialty subs. Even small subs, like this one, can cause severe hand and finger injuries. Working on or around blowout preventers will probably require the use of a safety harness. Check it out ahead of time to make sure it's approved for use. It is also important that anything you are using in conjunction with the harness is also rated and on the approved list. Nippling the BOP up or down means working in tight places, using cranes, chains, and come-alongs to move these heavy units into or out of position. All this activity creates line of fire issues that put our hands and bodies in harm's way. As you plan for the task at hand, ask yourself, how can I position my body to eliminate the risk of personal injury? One of the best methods we have for keeping ourselves out of the line of fire is to think about hazard identification. We plan our work, we identify the hazards, we mitigate the hazards, and we execute the work. One of the most important factors in preventing hand injuries in the mudroom is being cautious when using cutting tools. Note that while open blade knives are not recommended, they have been identified as the most appropriate option for certain jobs. If an open blade is selected for a job, work practices need to be put in place regarding body positioning. Before using an open blade cutting tool, you need to complete a cutting tool assessment form and submit it to the tool pusher for approval. In addition to being careful with cutting tools, there are other hand hazards to watch out for in the mudroom. Pinch points are everywhere. Every day we work with a lot of valves, flanges, crossovers, and machinery. Having the right protective gloves for the given task and being very mindful of where you're putting your hands is critical to preventing injuries. Gloves are important when changing mud screens in tight spaces that restrict body and hand movement. Use approved gripping tools to pull old screens and watch for sharp areas. When inserting a new screen, push evenly and be careful not to run your hands into the shaker frame. Many reported hand injuries happen during material handling. When using pallets and loaders, stay alert. Make sure loads are secured. Don't try to stabilize items or guide pallets with your hands. Watch your body position too. Proper positioning is sometimes your greatest strategy for reducing risk. If the situation is not safe, stop the job and make appropriate changes. You will also want to be careful handling and storing gas bottles. Roll them carefully and note the pinch points behind the saddle. Shop areas are another danger zone for your hands, especially when working with equipment like this breakout tool. They are big and powerful with several pinch points.
We call it Breakout Junior. It's a pulling apparatus to get our chassis outside of the collars. This slides up and down the rails, and these wheels can be a pinch point if you have your hand or anyone else has a hand in this area. So everything should be done outside of that area. This can come off the end if it's not pinned. So if this comes off the end, this point here becomes a big pinch point. We had a guy who, this came off the end, he was holding here, and then this ram came down and smashed his finger.
Other power tools like lathes, drill presses, pipe threaders, and testing tools all have moving parts that can cause severe injuries. Make sure that all guards are in place. Operate them safely and keep hands away from moving parts. When operating a drill press, watch finger placement as you place stock and keep those digits away from moving parts during drilling. When the hole is finished, shut the machine off before removing the stock. Grinders are used for a number of tasks. Follow procedures for safe operation.
We always make sure we have our safety glasses on and our face shield. And of course we wear our impact resistant gloves all the time, whenever, regardless of what we're working on. All of our gloves are impact resistant.
Hammers and wrenches of all sizes are some of our most commonly used tools. Not surprisingly, they're involved in quite a few hand injuries. Here are some important hand safety guidelines to keep in mind. Before using a hammer, be certain the face is in good shape. The head is secured to the handle, and the handle is not cracked or broken. Get a good grip, but don't choke up on the handle. Make sure your area is clear of other people or objects before swinging the hammer. If you are hammering a coupling on the floor or ground, watch that your feet and legs are out of the line of fire. When striking hardline, hammer down and not in an upward motion. When using a hammer and wrench, allow plenty of room for the hammer to strike the wrench without getting close to your hand. If you're holding the wrench and another crew member is using the hammer, make sure both of you pay attention to hand placement. Working in tight spaces with a wrench creates a risk of pinching your fingers or hand between the wrench and some solid object. This can be very painful if you're using a lot of force. Position your hand away from possible obstructions. When opening or closing valves, place hands in correct position and don't get your fingers pinched in the locking mechanisms. On some valves, you may need to use a bar in areas where there's not a lot of room to work. Check the pinch points before you open or close the valve because it's going to break free at a certain point and you don't want to pinch your hands between the valve and the valve bar or the hammer union in the valve bar. Doors and hatches are another common cause of hand and finger injuries. Always use the handles. Never grab the side of the door. That's asking for trouble. Keep a firm grip on all doors leading outside so you don't lose your hold if an unexpected gust of wind comes up. Be cautious when the door access is restricted, as is the case in the cellar, pump, and pit rooms. Be alert of handholds and footing on walkways, stairs, and retractable ramps. Large doors, like the ones found in pipe sheds, may have mechanical stops built into the tracking system. Door stops are not handholds. Use caution when working near these devices. Let's review the key points we've just covered. Hand injuries are one of the most frequently occurring injuries in the oil patch. We can reduce the number of hand injuries when we make safety a priority. Assess risks before beginning work. Use the right tools and PPE. Don't take shortcuts. Communicate with supervisors and crew members, and pay attention to the position of your hands at all times. By no means are the hand hazards we've been discussing cover every risk you might encounter, but they do show us that almost everything can be a hazard to hands and fingers, including a simple door if your hands are in the wrong place at the wrong time. That's why it pays to do every job the right way and with the right attitude. You control the safety of your hands because these injuries are preventable. Don't compromise them. Gain the upper hand on safety. Identify hazards, mitigate those hazards, and keep your hands out of harm's way. Make it a habit to continuously assess the risks for every task you perform.
Remember, our focus on safety is more than just words. It is an attitude. It's an attitude we take very seriously. Assuring the well-being of you and your fellow workers is an important part of the way we do business.
Making certain that safety is consideration number one on every job is why we put in place a very specific set of planning steps and prepare a written plan of work.
The actions you take and decisions that you make will determine whether you go home safe. Keep safety in mind with everything you do, and never compromise.